So I do inclusive service design, which means I add my own special lens of not just how do we build these services for all people, but specifically how do we look at this service in a way that is going to support um, people across different demographics, whether it's your culture, your race or ethnicity, your age, your gender,
hmm
your sexuality. Like I bring in all of those different elements to make sure that we're serving different populations in ways that they need to be served.
Join us at the inaugural Ascend Summit, where empowerment and healing become part of your new reality. Presented by You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, this summit is your gateway to growth, connection, and discovering your true potential. And it's all happening June 28th and 29th in Dallas, Texas. Don't miss your chance to be a part of something life-changing. Early bird tickets are on sale now. Secure your spot today by going to ascend.youarenotyourtrauma.com.
Welcome to the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, a show that reminds you that you are not alone, your experiences matter, and you are not defined by what you've been through. Each week, you will hear from the host and invited guests who have either personal or professional experience with trauma. They will share their stories and strategies for overcoming past wounds and beginning the journey toward healing and wholeness. Now, here's your host, a gifted speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur, Harriet M. Harris.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of You Are Not Your Trauma, the podcast that brings hope, healing, and inspiration to those who have experienced life's most challenging moments. It's here in this space that we peel back the layers of trauma, not just to expose it, but to understand and overcome it. I'm your host, Harriet M. Harris, and I am so glad that you're here today. I hope that this show is an important part of your healing journey. Now, today, we've got a conversation lined up that's both inspiring and deeply insightful, focusing on the power of direct work with trauma survivors and the transformative impact it can have. I'm joined by an incredible guest, Jaryn Miller, who spent a significant part of his career working hands-on with trauma survivors, is a leader in inclusive service design, a children's book author, and co-founder of Oakland Reparations. His work focuses on health and well-being. He comes from a unique angle, blending his expertise in service design with a deep commitment to mental health and well-being, especially within Black and oppressed communities. His journey and the stories he's going to share with us are all about connecting, healing, and empowering. So, welcome to the show today, Jaryn. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello, thank you for having me. That the kids book author is new, so it's
Okay.
kind of fun to hear that thrown in there into the mix. That's pretty fun.
Well, we'll have to let me make a note of that because we'll have to come and circle back to that
That I
so we
will
can hear
I
more
will
about
accept
it.
all promotion. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, to get us started, Jaren, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I am a service designer and I've done that in lots of big complex organizations. So I've worked in healthcare at the VA, as
hmm
well as in Kaiser Permanente, which is a big healthcare provider, as well as an insurance provider. And
Okay.
then most recently at Headspace Health, where we were kind of bridging mindfulness, everyday content,
hmm
along with mental health care through coaches or therapists. And so I've kind of done the mental health care thing in
hmm
all the different ways that you can do it, whether it's at a nonprofit or a corporate organization or a startup.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you have spent, as you mentioned before, well, in your bio, was mentioned you spent most of your career there in that mental health area.
Yeah, so it's been healthcare in general overall
Okay.
for most of the time, and then got more of a narrow focus in mental health just as things progressed, and I found sort of my sweet spot of what I was interested in and what I was
Nice.
gravitating towards.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's how that happened.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, look, before we jump too deep into our conversation, we're going to take a very quick commercial break. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Imagine having resources at your fingertips that support you through every step of your healing journey. That's exactly what you'll get with the You Are Not Your Trauma app. Access guided meditations that find your peace, read inspiring stories that resonate with your experiences, and join a community that truly understands. But that's not all. Dive into the Healing Chronicles and participate in community challenges. It's more than an app. It's a companion on your journey of self-discovery and healing. Download the You Are Not Your Trauma app today and join a community where your story matters and your healing journey is honored. Find us on the App Store and Google Play Store. Your journey to healing starts now.
All right. And we are back. Now, I am really excited, Jaryn, to have you here and to learn more about what you do. But before we get into your work, because I really want to know about that, can we start with your story? Like, what led you down this path of working directly with trauma survivors?
Yeah. So my work, I like to say I kind of bridge two of the things. So I grew up with parents who started a small business where they would buy homes and flip them in lower income neighborhoods in Philly, where I grew up. I grew up in the
Hmm.
suburbs of Philly. And then my dad was a carpenter, and they had a small business where my dad would drive around, fix people's furniture, build his own furniture. Most of the furniture in my house, my dad built by hand. So I
Nice.
got to grow up
Wow.
seeing him work with his hands and learning from him of like crafting completely new products and new things from
Mm,
scratch. And so that was my first job. My career started off in industrial design, which is basically designing new products. So it could be a
mm,
computer, it could be a laptop, it could be a car, a boat, it could be anything. Any new
okay.
product, um, someone has to design it. Someone has to figure out what it's going to look like and how it's
Yeah.
going to work and how big it should be and who it should be targeted at. And so that's where I started, was in product design. Um, for a lot of different reasons, it didn't really fit what I was looking for. So I really wanted to be more in research. I really wanted to be more in the social impact space. And I also wanted to be flexible enough to go where the problem led. So as a
Mm,
product designer, if I was looking into healthcare and learning about diabetes, then um, whatever problem we were trying to solve, the answer had to be a new product. And that wasn't
mm,
always the answer that I saw when I was doing the research and
mm,
talking to people. Sometimes it was just a poster that needed to happen. Sometimes it was a new role. Sometimes it was, there were lots of different ways to solve the problems. And so I found service design, and that was a path that gave me a little bit more flexibility to answer the questions in the way that I felt were the right way to answer it rather than forcing it into being a new product.
okay.
Um, One of the other reasons that appealed to me is that my grandmother, that's the other half of what I got to see growing up. My grandmother was one of the first Black women to start a nonprofit in Philadelphia. Yeah, she's amazing. I call her the mayor. So she grew up in the hood in Bristol, suburbs of Philly, and her door was always unlocked, and everyone in the community called her grandma. And she started a
Mhm.
whole bunch of food programs or dance programs or getting people drumming and learning music. And so I got to see her build community and build experiences
Mm,
and services that supported people and helped them get what they needed and also brought joy to a lot of folks. And so
wow.
I moved from the physical side of crafting things like my
Hmm.
father to building more services and experiences like my grandmother was able to do. And it's been a
Wow.
beautiful transition for me.
That is beautiful. That's such a great story. That's a great childhood.
It
Great
was, yeah,
experience.
it was a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
no complaints here.
Now, I know you mentioned a little bit about service design, but for those of us who aren't really familiar with it, could you explain what it is and how it can be a powerful tool in addressing mental health issues, especially in communities that have historically been underserved or overlooked?
Yeah, so first, most people don't know what service design is, that's part of why I do things like this and kind of
Yeah.
kind of spread the word of what service design is. And so just like the description I gave with product design, any product
Hmm.
that you see, someone had to figure out how is that going to work. It's the same with services. So if you think about going to the doctor, you have to schedule a visit, you have
Hmm.
to check in, you have to get directions to figure out how do I go and where do I arrive and when, what time, and who do I talk to. You have to go up to the counter and talk to someone. You have to get your bill after. So there's all these different touch points and interactions that
Mm,
you're having throughout a service. And so a service designer just tries to make that the best experience possible. So sometimes
okay.
that looks like creating something completely new. If you think about fast food, moving from you going in and sitting down at a restaurant, or maybe going in and grabbing something to go, to something completely new like the drive-through. Someone had to
Mm,
figure out how are all these different pieces going to work, and oh well,
gotcha.
this is actually a new role that we've created because someone's only going to be doing cashier work and another
Hmm.
person's only taking orders, and now that's separated the training, that's impacted that. We need
Okay.
this machine. Like there's so many different components, and a lot of what I do is just helping those different components talk to each other.
Nice. Well, that's very interesting. So when you think of the different things that are happening within different businesses, we have to a service designer to thank for getting that, making that connection.
Hopefully, hopefully. It's a
Okay.
it's a it's a newer discipline and it borrows from a lot of other disciplines.
Okay.
And so m- healthcare and government services, a lot of the banking, a lot of the bigger, more complex things, that's where service
Hmm.
design is really starting to grow. Because there's so many different things that have to come together. There's
Right.
regulations, there's so many different things that have to go right for you to develop something new. And
Absolutely.
to bring it more directly to the work that we're talking about, when you're trying to get a mental health provider or you're trying to seek services for your own trauma or for your own mental health, a lot goes into that. It's not just
Yes.
it can be hard to even go from yes, this is a thing I want, to actually seeking services. And so how
Hmm.
does a designer would have to figure out, how do we close that gap? How do we get people to go from
Okay.
knowing that they want support to actually helping them seek something? And then once they find something, how do we get them to stay in it? Because dealing with trauma is hard.
Yes,
I
it
don't know if you
is.
knew.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know, unfortunately, but yeah, I do know.
exactly.
Um, so in your work, what challenges do you find yourself coming up against most often?
So I do inclusive service design, which means I add my own special lens of not just how do we build these services for all people, but specifically how do we look at this service in a way that is going to support people across different demographics, whether it's your culture, your race or ethnicity, your age, your gender,
Mhm.
your sexuality. Like I bring in all of those different elements to make sure that we're serving different populations in ways that they need to be served. And
Okay.
so that plays out really heavily in an industry like mental health, where it
Yeah.
was founded on oppressing people and
Yes.
has historically harmed lots and lots of people. And so we've built this industry on one, locking people out of it, and
Mhm.
then when they do come in, harming them. And then now
Mm.
we're at a point in time where we want to invite them in and increase access to something that we've changed a little bit to make it helpful, right?
Yeah.
But not enough for many people.
Yeah.
And so that's one element, is just, how do we recognize all those different things, and how does that
Mhm.
factor into the service we build? And then also just different cultural needs. So for me, just speaking for myself, if I'm looking for a therapist, I'm going to want a Black therapist.
Yes.
So if I think about, if someone were to ask me what's the most important thing for you to find in a new therapist, that's probably at the top. And then it would
Yeah.
be maybe your training or qualifications or the type of therapy
Mhm.
that you give, or some other factors.
Yeah.
But if I asked another person, probably if I asked a white person, their answer isn't going to have culture at the top. Their
Right.
answer is going to be training,
Mm-hmm.
certifications, and some of those other things. And so if
Right.
I'm building a product to help people connect with a coach or a therapist or whatever, I have to factor that in. Do I build for everyone? Which
Mm-hmm.
is, if I did
Mm-hmm.
a poll and the results came back and showed education is the most important, do I build for that? Or if I divvy that poll up a little bit and I look at just my Black respondents and I
Mm-hmm.
see that for them, race and ethnicity is the clear number one. And it's like a big, there's a big gap between number
Yeah.
one and number two.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I factor that in?
Oh, great
And
question.
yeah, it lots of organizations are trying to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because you do have to balance. Lots of organizations are built to serve the people who have money, and often the people who have the money look like the core demographic that's already being served.
Yeah,
They're
that's
usually
true.
richer, they're usually whiter, they're usually in mental health, it's actually a little bit more um, women dominant than men
Mm-hmm.
dominant because
Yeah.
culture.
Yep.
But they fit the typical stereotypes of who already has access to things. And
Okay.
so, but they're the ones that can afford it and pay for it. And so we
Yeah.
want to sort of encourage and bring them in. At the same time, through my lens, I want to make sure that the people who most need it are getting it. And I also want to make sure that we're building something that's accessible to everyone, not just a certain group. And so
Absolutely.
from a business standpoint, I have to help them work through like how do we weigh all of these different options and how different are these approaches? And do we
Mm-hmm.
need to build one product for these people and another product for these other people? And because that
Mm.
becomes overwhelming too. And usually the answer is no, but
Yeah,
we have to
yeah.
be thoughtful in what we're developing.
Wow. There's a lot of thought that goes into that I would not have I wouldn't have thought of for services. So like my background is in IT, so programming,
Hmm.
and so I think about that though all those steps for something like that, but I never would have thought of it um for figuring out services. So
Hmm.
interesting. This is very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun for me. I get paid to do it, so
Hey,
I like it.
listen, I bet. And then you get to solve some problems, some like real world problems. So that's
That
also
is the
really
more
cool.
important part. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how have you found that the work that you do as a service designer actually supports and addresses the diverse ways trauma manifests in the lives and communities of Black and oppressed people?
Yeah. So one of them is helping the healthcare and mental health care industry talk about disparities. And
Mm,
so often when you're in conversations, we're talking about health disparities. The biggest topic that comes up is access. It's hard to give increased access.
mm-hmm.
Um, but if you go back to the how I started the conversation, the industry was started in some very harmful ways,
Yeah,
and so I don't need increased access to something that's hurting me. And so
right.
for me, I think more important than addressing access issues is also addressing how we develop and deliver these services to make sure that they're safe and accessible and actually helpful for the communities that we're trying to increase access for. And often they're not. They just weren't designed for someone like me. And so if I come into it, I'm many times having to teach the system how to serve me. And I have relatively low needs, so
Mm-hmm.
I have capacity to do that, but not everyone does. If you're in
Right.
a an emergency situation, you don't have the ability to come in and teach this service
Mm-hmm.
your own language. And we see that in a lot of different
Yeah.
ways. So even just not recognizing words that people use or accents that they use. I remember I was listening to a podcast. Um, I think it was about folks who were imprisoned and they were in a mental health facility and they said they were ear hustling and the doctor didn't know what that meant, and so they said like this person
Mm,
is crazy or whatever
mm-hmm.
whatever they diagnosed him with. And it's like no, he just is He's speaking a language you don't understand.
Yeah, that makes a lot
That's
of
it.
difference, though. Yeah, that makes a lot of difference. Huh, okay.
So that's one
S
way. Another way is just in the way that we actually do our work. Um, so the way that design started, if you were trying to build a new car, you would go out
Mhm,
and you would talk to, let's say you want to design a luxury car. You would talk to people who drove luxury cars.
true.
You would get to know them. You would watch what they do, how they use them, what they're looking for in a car. You would just kind of do interviews with them and observations. And that's pretty okay with a luxury car. But if you're trying to do the same thing with someone who's experienced trauma and you're trying to
Mhm,
learn about their interactions with the healthcare system or how what they've been through is showing up in their ability to seek services, that can be really dangerous in many ways. Like you can re-traumatize someone, you can have someone experiencing things that I as a designer was not trained to support.
mm,
And so that's another aspect of the work that I do is recognizing where design needs to learn from industries like social workers or therapists or coaches. Where do we need to lean on them? Where do we need to get out of the way so that they can do their work and separate our work from their work?
right.
And where are areas where we can lean in together and work together on some things?
Wow, okay. Well, Jaryn, when you think about the experience that you have, what unique challenges do trauma victims have you seen from trauma victims from marginalized communities face that you think are often overlooked in mainstream mental health practices?
Ooh, I'm gonna target it a little bit more at my industry, and then I'll
Okay.
I'll bubble out to that. So
Okay.
I remember what one experience that really tuned me into this was I was working at the VA, and we were trying to just improve the patient experience of
Hmm.
folks going into the VA. And I set up a bunch of interviews where I was going out and just talking to veterans, and I had them all in public places and at various times that just worked for everyone involved. And it was a pretty standard practice. We were just following kind of design 101.
Hmm.
And we went to one, and it was at the library, and it was a little bit closer to night. I think it was maybe like 6 or 7 o'clock, and so it was a little dark outside. And so I go in, I show up, and I start talking to this woman, and it turns out that she was a victim of abuse, and she hadn't really left her home, especially to meet a man at night in a very long time.
Wow.
And it was in that moment, so she starts telling me about this and how for her coming to speak to me and getting to participate in making this service better for her, better for
Hmm.
her fellow veterans. For her, it was empowering and it was something that she really wanted to do. And I felt fantastic in that moment.
Mm,
And
I
then the next
bet.
moment, I felt not fantastic because I didn't
Mm.
know that. I didn't know that I was putting her in that situation where she would have to face
Mm.
her trauma in a particular way. And it worked out in that setting. You know, for her it was empowering and
Right.
like I said, it worked out. But it also showed me the power that designers have without always even
Mm.
knowing what we're
Wow.
getting ourselves into. And so it
Wow.
just made me approach my work in a more conscious way, a more trauma informed
Okay.
way to make sure that I'm recognizing that.
Wow. That is very powerful. And I'm glad it worked out in a good way for her.
Same, same. It's one of my best memories. You know, she sent me a letter
Yeah.
later. She sent flowers to the
Wow.
VA because it was really profound for her,
That's
and just being
great.
able to listen, have someone listen to her. I think
Yeah.
I that interview taught me a lot. I didn't know. I was a rookie, and so it taught me a lot, and most of it were really good lessons.
I like to say the best experiences, those lived experiences. So there you go.
Yes, yes.
All right. Now, could you discuss how your work in service design has directly impacted the individuals and communities that you've worked with?
Yes. So one of my favorite recent projects that I did was looking at specifically how do we bring Black men into mental health more.
Mm,
And it was really great because most of the time when I'm doing design, I'm not designing for myself. That's kind of a
right.
whole thing. But in this case, I really got to embrace like looking into people like me and how do I develop services for them, for people like me. And
Nice.
it was great. Um, and so what we did was we looked at research, we talked to people, we did all the things, and we got to learn one, what are people looking for when they're seeking services? What does seeking services even mean? Um,
Mm,
what do they think of when they hear the term self-care? A lot of times
mm.
in general, if we ask people, what do you think of when you hear self-care? It's usually a woman in a bathtub with a glass wine. Right?
Yo,
Sounds delightful.
it does, but that's not always what you want
But
to do.
but that's yeah. If you're imagining that and that doesn't look like you, then and that's not what self-care looks like for you,
Mm-hmm.
then this term doesn't mean, it's not
Yes.
inviting you in, right?
Yeah.
And so what does that look like for them? Well, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's playing video games or
Yep.
it's listening to music in the car, it's smoking things that are legal in California. Um, I
You live in California now.
do. I do. And you don't even got to smoke it. You can
Just ride down the street.
get your medicine however you need it.
Understood.
um, yeah, and so I think really embracing that was
Mm-hmm.
fun and getting to see, okay, how do I design something that's going to make that person say, "Oh, this is for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is for me." That's something that I talk
Wow.
about a lot. There are services that I can interact with where it works for me. This thing will do what it needs to do, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
made for me. Um, but the example that I give most of the time is I was listening to a podcast one time, and I like NPR when I'm driving. I had a long drive. I'm an old person now, so I listen to NPR. And so I was used to the standard intros, and then all of a sudden, one came on and it said they were saying like, how did this all start? And normally it would say this all began when blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, this one they said, and it all popped off when this person came and they were talking. And I said, what is going on here? They're talking to me.
You
They're
felt
speaking my
seen.
language. And it changed my whole perspective on it, right? Like I can engage with that
Wow.
podcast in a completely different way. And that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
every podcast needs to be made for me. And it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy a podcast that isn't targeted. But
Right.
I felt seen in that moment and it was great. And so I wanted to bring that same feeling of this is
Mm,
made for me to mental health.
I like that.
And we got to build out some ideas and test out some ideas. And at the end, we were after we did some testing, we were interviewing folks and he gave me the perfect message. So I said, how was it? And he said, you know, it feels great. This product is for everyone, but usually when people say it's for everyone, they don't mean us. And so
Mm,
this one, it felt like it was for me, but it's also something that everyone can use. And that was, yeah, that made my
that's
heart
some
smile. That
good
was exactly
truth
what I was
though.
looking for.
Yeah. That's some good truth. Because that's also real, right?
It
That's
is.
just like we walk into a store and things are shown and explained, and the first thing we got to do is like, okay, let me read the ingredients and see if this really for me. I'm thinking like shampoo, made
Yep.
for everyone. It
Yep.
is not made for everyone.
Yep.
So that's real good. Now I want to
And
circle back. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like living in a world where you're not included in the everything, right?
Yeah,
Like that
yeah,
that's its own trauma.
yeah.
Knowing whenever you encounter something, they're going to say this is one size fits all or this is made for everyone. Um, and knowing that you don't fit that mold, that does something to people, and it's really difficult to navigate systems. And oh, I know that this, I can't even go look at this makeup because they're not going to have my shade, or
Mm-hmm.
I can't, these new shoes came out, and they look fire, but I know they're not gonna have my size. Like,
My struggle all the time.
mm, I'm sorry. I'll fix it. Just give me time.
Listen, I'm dependent on you now.
It's on my list. I'm gonna fix healthcare, and then I'll circle
Shoe
back to
sizes.
shoes.
Okay,
Shoe
I'm with
sizes.
it. I need that. I need that because honestly, I got 3 kids. With every child, my foot grew. So, whew, yeah. We want, yeah, conversation for another day. But no, seriously, there are 2 things I want to circle back to, and I don't know if this is like classified service designer information, but one thing you said that you looked into is one was, what does seeking services mean? And I would
Yes.
love to know how that played out, like what kind of responses that you got. And then the other one, I'm gonna make sure I got it right. When you mentioned a little bit earlier that actually I'm gonna come back to that one because I want to make sure I wrote it down right.
Okay.
But for one,
Okay.
let's start with that.
Yeah. So a lot of it is taking into context culture that is shaping the humans that are interacting with the service.
Mm-hmm.
We live in America. We live in capitalism. We live in patriarchy. We live in lots of different things that are adding color to the situation. So, I just to make it me statements, but I, like
Right.
many men, have something called alexithymia, which means I don't know what my emotions are. I wasn't taught that. I'm not very in tune with like how I'm feeling most of the time. I'm working on it,
Mhm.
but I'll tell the story. I cracked a tooth one time because I was so stressed that I was clenching my jaw at night while I
Right.
was sleeping because I hated my job. I was stressed. I wasn't making enough, all the different things that everyone deals with.
Right,
But if
right.
you had asked me if I was stressed, I would have said, no, I'm fine.
Mhm.
I'm dealing with everything and I have a job. I would have said all the things. And so to answer the question, how do men seek mental health? The answer is often they don't.
Right.
And so you have to kind of start from there, from like, how do you even help someone recognize that they do need to seek help
Mhm.
or that they're seeking it in a non-traditional way? That when you're
Right.
playing those video games, you're seeking relief, you're seeking a way to zone out. Um, that when you are coming home and you're trying to vent to your partner, that is seeking some form of support. And so
Right.
it's recognizing it in the moments that they're already doing it, and it's helping them recognize and connect the dots between what's going on in their lives and their needs and all of that.
Well, you talked a little bit earlier, and I want to make sure I'm phrasing this right, but you talked a little bit earlier about, certain, because, mental health services were not built for everyone, that we have, people who struggle to actually experience it. They don't see it as something that they need, therefore they don't get it, but then they decide that hey, maybe I want it, and um I want to seek some services. So, how do you get them to transition, I guess, or maybe this is a question that you may have been you may have looked into, but that transition from, I want to seek, I've decided I want to do it, but
Hmm.
then taking the step to do it and then actually going to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, so that was a perfect segue into the thought that I forgot.
Look at there. We both look
We're in sync.
working together. It's working
So
together.
a lot of the times it happens because of family and friends. So if
Mm,
you are, you have a hot temper and your partner's like, listen, either you either you fix that or we're done.
hmm
Then or you recognize in your parenting it's showing up and it's just making you feel a way that you don't want to feel, or you're seeing your kids start to mirror back things and like
mm,
that. There's usually these big life transitions that are happening where it makes people
yeah,
sort of want to seek change, want to see what's going on. But a lot of times it's through family and friends kind of letting them know or spelling it out for them Whereas in some other communities, it might be they will go to a doctor and if so one of the things we can see is that if service X is recommended from a family and friend, people are more likely to use it. If
Okay.
service X is recommended by a doctor, people are more likely to use it. Versus if someone just sees it on a website or walks past it or anything like that.
I can see
And
that.
yeah. And so in a lot of communities, it's the trusted professional that's kind of at the
Mhm.
top of the list in terms of like who they're going to trust the most.
Yeah.
And in my community, it was the family and friends who they're going to trust the most.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that, like, just in how we reach out to them, it, that's
Makes all the
one
difference.
method that we're going to have to use. And then in terms of like moving through what we call the stages of change, so service design borrows from lots of other disciplines. So behavior scientists came up with the stages of change, which is
Mhm.
you can be I'm gonna mess it up, but you can be aware that you want something, and then you move into like seeking, and then you move into like actually giving it a try, and then
Okay.
once you maintain that for a little while, then that's something different. And
I like
so
that.
there's different things that you have to do across each of those different stages, and there's different ways that you communicate. There's different things that you want to show.
Right.
Sometimes you want to show people here's progress, right? Like you are
Mm.
actually progress. You if it's working out, right? Like
Right.
you
Right.
want to show one of the fun things with service design is you get to play around uh with psychology, right? So
Mm.
it takes time to lose weight. So but people want instant gratification. So what can I
Yes.
give you the moment you're done working out so that you feel gratified even though you haven't lost those 2 pounds?
Mm-hmm.
So Fitbit or any app tracking thing is like, you did it. You worked out.
Mm.
Look, this is perfect. I forgot that was going to
Yeah.
happen. And so it balances your short-term goals and your
Mm.
short-term celebrations with the long-term goal and the like bigger monumental celebrations.
Oh, good
And you
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you can do that same thing with mental health. So how do you kind of make someone feel good that they actually scheduled that session? Because that's often the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because
then how do you no, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I actually talked to someone recently and they're like, yeah, I know I need to do this. I need to get this therapist. I need to schedule the appointment, but I just haven't. And that was, that's exactly what I was just wondering. Like once they, because it's hard enough to get them to say yes, right? To get for someone to say, I mean, honestly, it's hard enough
Mhm,
for someone who doesn't see the need or hasn't, but like you said, family and friends are able to kind of, look,
mhm.
you need to do this, you need to do that. Someone reached out to me that I've known for a while, and she said, I really hadn't thought about my trauma until I started listening to your podcast. And she was like, I know I need to, take this step. I need to do this, but, I haven't done it yet. And it's like, hey, you know what? Making the phone call is like the first step. So I know it's a process for everybody. Everybody has to, be at that place where they're ready and they really want it. But I was just kind of curious if there was something within service design that you all have been like working on to move that along.
Um, yeah, a few small things. The hardest part is that with services like this, when you need them the most is when you have the least capacity to seek them out. So
Mm,
when you're
that's true.
swimming in the middle of trauma, you can't find
You
a
ain't trying to hear
therapist.
it.
You ain't trying
Mm-mm.
like,
You ain't trying to hear
okay, now let
it.
me I'm activated, right? And then let me stop this. Let me check my
Mhm.
insurance. Let me find who's fits my insurance, and then I got to look through and find someone that I think looks interesting or would vibe with me, and then I got to
Mhm.
schedule, and then that's a week or two out, and then I
It's
got to do 80
always
forms and all the it's hard.
forms. Those forms.
So many forms.
So many forms.
Good
I'm
old
like,
GAD 7.
can you all not have a
Mm.
central database? A central database where y'all just pull there's a service design. There you go. I literally just said that last week when I
Yep.
was going to a doctor. So I was like, can they not just have a central database? I give you
Yes.
permission and you
Take it.
say, there you go. There's
Yeah.
a
So a
service.
lot of it is trying to reduce the time between all of those different
Mm-hmm.
things. So okay, there's a lot of services where we'll worry about the insurance stuff. You don't have to worry about it. There's
Mm-hmm.
other ones
Okay.
where we're gonna give you a 2 second quiz or sometimes a 10-minute quiz, but either way, we're gonna make sure we match you with the right person, so you don't have to do
Okay.
that part. So it's kind of breaking the service apart and trying to figure out how do you optimize the different parts of it to make it
Interesting.
feel better, and feel more approachable for folks. But um, like I said, a lot of it is also trying to get ahead of someone having a moment of need. And so how do
Yeah.
you get people in before they're in that crisis? But
Yeah.
then how do you recognize when they do need to up level care, or
Mm-hmm.
something else is happening where they need something different?
Good point. Good points. And I would just say that I really like the fact that you all are already, these are things that are already in motion. Like these are already things that you all are thinking about. We're over here like, can y'all figure out no. But not really like in the process, I guess. I'm back at the forums. Just okay.
So that's another one is I personally find I hate the forms. So
I
there's
hate
you have to
forums.
do screeners for depression or anxiety, or
Mm,
there's a thousand different screeners. And I hate it because you can just ask
yeah.
me if I'm depressed. Like I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
You
You ain't
know,
gotta yeah, I don't have to fill out the forms for you to do the assessment to count the
right.
numbers to no, we don't have to do all that.
And this is as someone who earlier in the call I said like I don't know my emotions. But I
Mm-hmm.
I can tell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
I think
I'm
sometimes
a
we're
little
a
bit more
little
depressed this week than I was last week. You know, like
mm-hmm.
we can
Yeah,
just skip. We can just skip
yeah.
this. So it's also trying to develop measures that are um, clinically validated,
Mm-hmm.
because that's important for getting reimbursements, but also feel human and
Yeah.
are fast and um, feel approachable. And I also will say this: a lot of things that are clinically validated were only clinically validated on a very narrow portion of the population. Like it was
Mm,
made for, by, and tested on
yeah.
and with one group, and then we say it's clinically validated to use with every
For
group.
everybody.
And
Yeah.
then however many years later someone tests that and find out that's not quite true.
That's not true. Okay. That's fine. Now, Jaryn, what's one lesson or insight from your work that you think everyone should hear? Something that could change the way we see trauma and healing.
My favorite is if you design for the people who have the highest needs, then you'll solve it for everyone else. So,
Mm,
for example, in birth, there's a famous statistic that Black women and other birthing people are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from giving
yeah.
birth, or recently after birth. They have it the hardest. If you add being queer on top of that, then there's an extra layer. Um, and there's lots of historical reasons. So again, that
Mm-hmm.
same industry was found. The person who's called the father of gynecology experimented on enslaved women and did all sorts of terrible things around their womb. And so, if you have an industry that's founded on this,
Mm-hmm.
it for me, it's easy to see how when you fast forward, some of those same issues are still showing up. But to take that example, if I design a service, a reproductive service that
Mm-hmm.
serves a queer Black person
Mm-hmm.
giving birth, and it produces better results for them, it's going to be amazing for everyone else.
Everybody else. Yeah.
Amazing. And everyone else is going to want to pay for it. They're gonna
Mm,
tell their friends about it. If it works
wow.
for So one of the ways that we learn that is in design. If you're trying to design shoes for an everyday
Mm-hmm.
person, then you should look at a mountain climber. You should look at someone who goes hiking. Like look at people who are on
Right.
the extremes, because you'll learn something from that that you can bring back and kind of
Yeah.
apply to the everyday person.
Huh. That's very interesting. I like
The
that.
same thing. People just don't like to think of People don't like to think of culture. We're
Yeah.
in a society where people feel like you're not allowed to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and you definitely shouldn't be bringing it up in work. And
Yeah.
that's just not realistic. People,
Yeah. That's
culture is
true.
good. We
Yeah.
just have to
We're all
recognize when
different.
bias
I
is
mean,
showing up, and yeah,
yeah, we're all different. We were created that way intentionally. So yeah, it's just how it is.
exactly. So that's my lesson. If whatever you're doing in your industry, if you can do it for whoever needs it the most, then you'll be all right.
I like
Focus
that.
on them.
Well, I have definitely learned some things today. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. We're going to take another brief commercial break. When we return, we're going to wrap up our chat and Jaren's going to give us his final thoughts. So we will be right back.
Want a chance to win exclusive You Are Not Your Trauma merch? Here's how. Leave a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform and share your thoughts with us. It helps us reach more listeners who may also be seeking healing and growth. Once you left your feedback, visit feedback.youarenotyourtrauma.com to let us know you've entered by entering your info and the word feedback in the message section. You could be a lucky winner. Now stay tuned for today's inspiring episode, and thank you for being a part of the You Are Not Your Trauma community.
Okay, we are back.
We
A
laughed
huge,
too.
we did, we did, we did.
You
I
don't
was
gotta
trying to
hide
keep
it.
it
We were
together.
laughing.
I was
We
trying
were
to keep
laughing.
it together. We did. We had a good laugh, but no, thank you, Jaryn, for coming on, for sharing your journey, your experience, your knowledge with us. I think that your dedication to the work that you do is really empowering, to just constantly find ways to help those who are underserved, who are oppressed, who, um, really don't feel comfortable in certain spaces, and you're trying to like bridge that gap. So um I think it's conversations like these that really remind us of the profound impact of compassion and understanding. I think that was something that came from, watching your grandmother, from the story that you shared in the very beginning. So uh thank you. Thank you so much for just being a part of today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, for those final thoughts.
Well,
Final
first
thoughts
you're
from
gonna make me
Jaryn.
cry because now I'm thinking about my grandma, but
Oh, I'm
I'll pull
sorry.
it together.
Sorry. Okay.
Um, so we laughed.
We did.
That was on purpose. Joy is important. So often I do work around trauma, and I like to say trauma is pain that lingers, right? You
Mm-hmm.
remember it. Pain that you
Yeah.
remember. Trauma is memory,
Yeah.
but joy is memory too. And
That's
so
true.
is laughter and love and connection. And so just how trauma has shown up in the legacy of all of these different industries, you can also see the joy and the resistance that also is showing
Mhm.
up in the legacy of all the communities interacting with them. And a lot of times when we talk about minority experiences, oppressed experiences, we focus more on the pain
Mhm.
because it's important and you need
Yeah.
to. And there's a lot of joy. And
Yeah.
I love my memories of my grandma. Um, should the media tells me that they're sad, right? The media
Mhm.
tells me that we were poor and that I was surrounded by poverty and drugs and all sorts of bad stuff.
Mhm.
In reality, they were amazing. I I only remember joy from seeing my community be around each other and dance
Beautiful.
and play and speak our own special language and move in our own special ways. And I love feeling the joy of my community. And that gets passed down through generations, just like trauma and just like
Yeah.
generational poverty, small things, whatever. So
Beautiful.
I would say celebrate the joy, and that is something that I
Yes.
try and do in my work is balance out some of the hard things that we have to talk about, with also
Yeah.
recognizing the beautiful things that we get to experience and pass along too.
That is beautiful. Celebrate the joy, guys. Celebrate the joy. Now, speaking of joy, I'm going to circle back to the very beginning when Jaryn smiled really big when I mentioned him as a children's author.
Yeah.
And I told him I was going to come back to that, and I meant that because I want to hear. I had two little people. Tell me about this children's book.
I gave myself a beautiful segue because that's what the book is. It's a celebration of joy. So
Beautiful. Okay.
yeah, it's based off of a real experience of me interacting with my kid and them just kind of having fun playing dress up. When they were young, they loved Beyonce and just wanted to dance and pose and be Beyonce. We actually, funny enough, never wanted to wear pants. Never knew why. We were like, yo, we got to put some pants on. Beyonce in the homecoming performance,
Mm-hmm.
she's wearing like a leotard, and so it looks
Mm-hmm.
like she's not. It looks like she has her underwear on. So my beautiful little baby was running around with no pants on because I'm Beyonce. I don't need pants. And so the book is talking about how do you get inspiration, but also find yourself in that. So the character JJ goes on a little journey to find inspiration, gets a little distracted, but ends up having fun along the way anyway, and finds his own beautiful pose. So it's called JJ Finds His Pose.
JJ finds his pose. And where is JJ finds his pose?
All the places you buy the books. So
All
it's
the
on Amazon,
places.
it's on Barnes and Noble,
Okay.
should be anywhere. It's probably easier to get online than in person. But
Okay.
once your audience gets on it, we're gonna be everywhere.
There you go. There you go. You heard it here first, or well, maybe not first, but you at least heard it here.
You heard it here. That's what matters.
That's what matters. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for your inspiration of Celebrate Joy. And I celebrate the joy. And I look forward to checking out JJ Finds His Pose. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything that you shared. Thank you for the laughs. Um, and as always, for our listeners, I want to now invite you all to join the conversation. I love to hear how today's episode touched you. You can share your stories on or your insights with us on social media using the hashtag You Are Not Your Trauma. And be sure to tag You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Your story could be just what someone else needs to hear. And also, thank you all for listening in, tuning in to this week's episode of You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. Your presence is a vital part of this collective journey. If you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to share it with someone who can benefit from the information that Jaryn has shared. Also, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Now, this is your reminder. I recently announced that the Ascend Summit 24 is happening this summer, June 28th and 29th in Dallas, Texas. So mark your calendars. This is going to be an incredible opportunity to hear from experts, connect with your fellow survivors, and discover new strategies to aid you on your healing journey. Early bird tickets are now available at ascend.youarenotyourtrauma.com. You can check out the website, www.youarenotyourtrauma.com, to leave feedback, request to be a guest on the show, subscribe to the show, get information on our show guests, or to get information about advertising on You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. You can connect with You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram at You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And if you have a story to share, please email me at contact@harrietmharris.com. Also, don't forget to download the You Are Not Your Trauma app for more resources and community support. It is a fantastic tool to accompany you on your healing journey. It is available in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. And you can also listen to your podcast episodes right there from the app as well. Now, if you need additional resources to aid you on your journey of healing and self-discovery, I encourage you to download the You Are Not Your Trauma Resource Guide. It is available through the app or by visiting resourceguide.youarenotyourtrauma.com. Until next time, Take care, and please remember, you are not your trauma.